Now.
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It's 7:06 on O'Connor and Company. Thanks for tuning in here, where we love you as much as Kamala Harris obviously loves Doug Emhoff. We if you were late to our program, we would never scream, "Where the F have you been?" Right, Julie?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Unless we've been married for 20 years or something, and then all bets are off. Sorry, Darren. Coming up at 8:05, Match Slap CPAC, and 8:35, Julie Kelly. That's Julie Gunlock. I'm Larry O'Connor.
The president reached up towards the front of the vehicle to grab at the steering wheel. Mr. Engel grabbed his arm, said, "Sir, you need to take your hand off the steering wheel. We're going back to the West Wing. We're not going to the Capitol."
Cassidy Hutchinson, former very low-level staffer in the White House, recalling what she claimed was an incident that happened on January 6th after the president gave his speech at the Ellipse. But, of course, at the time, we all sort of smelled that story for what it was, a big pile of bunk. We now later learned that there were plenty of witnesses at the time at the Secret Service.
The driver of the limo, or of the, the beast.
Right, who completely discounted that story, but Liz Cheney and the J6 committee never allowed the American people to see that testimony until after Congressman Loudermilk became the chairman of a special select committee to look into the January 6th incidents. And now we've learned even more about the relationship behind the scenes between Liz Cheney, that woman, Cassidy Hutchinson, and television personality and also former White House staffer, Alyssa Farah. And it was John Solomon, investigative journalist, who had the story yesterday at Just the News, and he joins us now. John, always good to talk with you. I hope I set that up properly.
You did indeed. I was very, very well done. It's pretty remarkable. Liz Cheney is the quarterback of what was a Democrat investigation. Just crazy.
Tell me what we learned yesterday with regard to the release of these text messages and Signal messages, which is an encrypted texting app that people use, especially here in Washington if they work for the government. What were the communications behind the scenes that led to that very memorable yet dubious testimony?
Well, we all know what it means to lawyer up. We watch TV dramas, and we know what it means. When someone has a lawyer, the government then works through that lawyer in order to have any contact with a witness or a defendant. So Cassidy Hutchinson had a longtime lawyer, one that in her own text messages she said was doing a good job. And for some reason, Congresswoman Liz Cheney decided to go around that lawyer and start having direct and indirect communications with Cassidy Hutchinson. Some are direct Signal text messages between them. Some are through a friend, Alyssa Farah Griffin. In all the instances, they're clearly trying to talk to her about additional testimony. It's that additional testimony that eventually would come up with a story she never told Congress the first two times she testified, which is the story of the limousine hijacking, which never occurred. Donald Trump never tried to hijack or commandeer his presidential limousine and take it to the Capitol after his speech on the Lips. He asked if he could go. The agent said no. He went back to the White House. That was the end of it. But Cassidy Hutchinson develops this extraordinary, dramatic story that's foisted upon the American people that simply isn't true. And even if you're going to present the information, she's a hearsay witness, right? She's sort of the REO Speedwagon witness of the entire investigation. I heard it from a friend who heard it from another friend who heard it from another friend. And at the end of the day, she's given all this credibility, and the people who actually were in the car with the president aren't even allowed to tell their story at the same hearing. The American people. But it all starts with Liz Cheney having ex parte contact around the lawyer there. Now, this is a problem for Congress. It's an embarrassing situation. But for Liz Cheney, it's a little more personal. She is a licensed lawyer in the city of Washington, D.C. The city bar rules, the D.C. bar rules require that you go through lawyers. Now, can a D.C. bar impose its will on a congressional investigation? Probably not. But she knew, she had to have known that what she was doing was improper and unethical. And in fact, there's a delicious text message where Alyssa Farah Griffin tells Cassidy Hutchinson, I just talked to Liz Cheney. She really wants to talk to you, but she knows that having contact with you without your lawyer might be an ethical problem. So Liz Cheney actually knew what she was doing, according to these text messages, was inappropriate.
Yeah, and Julie, I suspect Liz Cheney right now, after reading these stories and seeing these text messages released, she's now all still in the grass, all coiled up and hissing. If I can continue the REO Speedwagon references.
Yeah, John, for this story, did you all reach out to Liz Cheney and ask for any comment?
We did. We got crickets. It's funny. She's teaching young minds at University of Virginia, but no answer. When we called the University of Virginia, they said they had no way to reach her, which I found kind of interesting, given that she's an employee. But
it's like Kamala and Doug Emhoff.
yeah, they must have the
Maybe
same
she's
PR
at
company,
spinning
no doubt
class.
about it. Yes. Listen, there's something very important here that is a twist to the whole plot. So the way Congress got these text messages is you use Signal so that they can't be discovered, right? That's why you use encrypted apps, so they're hard to find. It turns out that Cassidy Hutchinson and her lawyer told Congress that they took screenshots of these encrypted communications, and it's actually Cassidy Hutchinson who ultimately turns over these comms that expose what Liz Cheney was doing to Congress. So she takes screenshots of these encrypted disappearing messages, and she ultimately keeps them, and then she can dish it to Congress at some point. That's part of the story that went on here that I think a lot of people were surprised by yesterday.
Julie and I are looking at each other with our mouths wide open on that one.
Who in Congress, I'm sorry, I might have missed it from the article, but who in Congress did she turn these over to?
Well, Congressman Barry Loudermilk, he's the chairman of the House Administration Subcommittee on Oversight. So he inherited the January 6th investigation when Democrats left, and he has done a relentless job. And you know what's really interesting about Congressman Loudermilk? He is a methodical fact finder. He's not a guy looking to grandstand. He's not looking to go to press conferences. He's just gone to the old-fashioned shoe leather of just going out and getting facts. And the more facts we learn from him, the more we realize how much we were misled. If you remember the famous tapes from Nancy Pelosi we talked about a couple months ago when those came out, Nancy Pelosi saying, I'm responsible for this, and I should have had that was Congressman Barry Loudermilk. If you remember the famous video footage that showed the door was accidentally propped open by Capitol Police, and over 300 of the people went in the Capitol because the cops left the door unlocked. That was Congressman Barry Loudermilk.
Yeah.
He's done some tremendous work, and you know why he started this investigation? He personally was accused by the January 6th committee of leading a tour, a reconnaissance tour. That's actually the word.
That's what they called it.
Yeah, to the Capitol. He never went to the Capitol that day. He was just taking some constituents around the congressional building. So he knew then if he could be portrayed that way, maybe a lot of the other facts weren't. And for the last 2 years, he's really given the American people the facts we were all denied.
Hey, John Solomon, this stuff's too good, and I know we've got more questions. Are you going to be able to stick around for one more segment here?
I'd love to.
Take
Love
you
your show.
about
Anytime.
7:21 or something. Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Julie.
Well, I seem to recall that the January 6th committee, after it was finished, they destroyed some records. Am I right on that?
Well, we think they destroyed them. They can't be found, right? There are all the videotapes of these interviews that can't be found. And as you know, video can do things that a transcript can't, and that is to show body in motion, to give voice inflection.
Yeah.
So someone could say something and it could sound declarative, and they might have been asking a question you wouldn't know from the transcript. So it's he wanted to get those. Those have not been located, and that is an issue under congressional rules because all evidence and investigation should be preserved. No one seems to know where they are. Benny Thompson, the chairman's like, I don't know where they are. So there are a lot of very interesting pieces of behavior here that again suggest, just like the story you started this segment with, that the January 6th committee may have known what it was doing was deception. You wouldn't allow Cassidy Hutchinson, hearsay witness, to testify without at least giving the Secret Service a chance. And of course, they did that in the summer of 2022, and literally misled the Congress. They didn't follow their own rules for balanced witnesses. And of course, it appears now that Liz Cheney didn't follow the rules for working with witnesses through their lawyers.
Yeah, and by rules you mean basic legal and ethical standards here that are dictated here in the Washington, D.C. for lawyers and for members of Congress. All right, we've got more with John Solomon, more questions about this, including this lawyer that Cassidy Hutchinson dismissed at the suggestion of Liz Cheney. It appears, he did speak with Just the News, and he had something to say about these communications with Liz Cheney, and you'll hear what he had to say in a moment. It's 7:15, WMAL traffic and weather every 10 minutes, first on the fives.
Some of these are young women who worked on the Trump campaign. Some worked in the Trump White House. Some who worked in offices on Capitol Hill. All who knew immediately that what happened that day must never happen again. America had the chance to meet one of these young women yesterday, Miss Cassidy Hutchinson. her superiors, men many years older, a number of them are hiding behind executive privilege, anonymity, and intimidation.
That was one of the narratives that Liz Cheney developed on the January 6th committee. It was all young women. Cassidy Hutchinson, one of them. She fit the bill that Liz Cheney wanted to portray of the Trump administration, full of these cowardly old men hiding behind immunity, as she put it. That would be their constitutionally protected right to not testify before such a committee. But, of course, Liz Cheney called it hiding and cowardice. But John Solomon, we now know, based on these text messages that have been revealed by Congressman Loudermilk, that there was a lot going on behind the scenes. And I just want to take our time as we discuss the timeline here, because, as you mentioned, Cassidy Hutchinson had already delivered multiple testimony, multiple moments and instances where she sat and gave testimony to this committee. It wasn't until at Liz Cheney, I don't want to say, you tell me, did Liz Cheney suggest that she change lawyers and fire her lawyer? And then, we do know that she did fire her lawyer, and she ended up with lawyers recommended by Liz Cheney, and those lawyers worked pro bono. And it was only then that she delivered this testimony that ended up being the blockbuster. That ended up being untrue, by the way.
I think you did a good job setting that up, because I think she gives two testimonies, and she's inquiring if she's going to have to go back for a third testimony. This is Cassidy Hutchinson starting to find out, she's asking her friend, find out from the committee. That's when she finds out that Liz Cheney would be interested in talking to her. That occurs in April after the second testimony. During this time frame, there are multiple text messages that show that Cassidy Hutchinson is generally happy with the representation she's been getting from her longtime lawyer, Stefan Passantino. Mm-hmm. We interviewed Stefan Passantino because it's very important for us to make sure that he didn't give permission for Cassidy Hutchinson to talk to Liz Cheney without him being present. And he says, absolutely not. In fact, he didn't know that these contacts occurred until we reached out to him and asked him for comment and told him what the text messages said. He was really shocked.
Wow.
And he was quite upset. But there is a moment after the contact with Cassidy Hutchinson and Liz Cheney, so they finally talk directly, and it's a few days after that Cassidy Hutchinson fires Stefan Passantino and hires a new set of lawyers. And in her book, she reveals, in her memoir that she wrote that made a lot of money during the post-hearing moments, she reveals that she got the lawyers and the names and the arrangement through Liz Cheney. That's what she says in her book.
So she did help arrange this. Okay.
That's what her book says, right? So all these witnesses are going to have to come back now, probably be interviewed. And I think maybe now, and this is something that Congressman Loudermilk's been saying, he may have to ask Liz Cheney to submit to an interview, and there's a reason for that. If Liz Cheney was willing to go around the lawyer, when you know you're not supposed to do that, if Liz Cheney was willing to provide something of value to a witness before she testified, new lawyers, the third question that Congress has is, did Liz Cheney or anyone around Liz Cheney have anything to do with the book deal that she got, which would be financial benefit to a witness? So that's that's a question we've not been able to get Liz Cheney to answer.
Right.
That's a question that we've not been able to get the current lawyers for Cassidy Hutchinson. But Congress wants to ask that question, right? Again, it's just a fact-finding mission, not an accusation. But I think people want to get to the bottom of that because the pattern here is very unusual, right? You're going around the lawyer, then getting that person lawyers, and then the question is, then she gets a book deal. Well, who helped her get the book deal? And that's a question that Congress has said they want answered sometime between now and the end of the year.
Yeah, the book Enough, published by Simon & Schuster, it's one of those DC books where nobody reads, but a ton of people buy it to. Basically, it's money laundering, in my opinion.
And there's groups that will buy them in bulk.
That's right. And so the beneficiary is the writer.
You know, John, I just to remind everybody, The View, which Alyssa Farrar is a panelist on, is part of ABC News. So I'm sure this will be dealt with on The View today.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I'm sure this revelation.
Part of the news section.
And Alyssa Farrar is part of that cast.
Yeah.
I just want to, because I want to make sure that everyone's following this. If a witness tries to talk to the chairwoman of the committee or even a member of the committee and says, can we talk directly? If that witness is represented by a lawyer, the only ethical and legal thing for that member of Congress to do is say, I can't talk to you unless your lawyer is present, right? That was Liz Cheney's obligation.
And the D.C. bar makes clear that only the lawyer can waive that, right? You can't have a client who's mad for a second say, I just waive it.
Right.
The D.C. bar is very clear. You got to have the contact with the lawyer and go that route.
So, John Solomon, there's that point. I just want to get through these quickly.
Yeah.
Number two, you've spoken to the lawyer at the time, and he has said, I would have never given permission for her to talk to Liz Cheney directly if I weren't present, right? He said that now?
He said, I did not. Yeah, he didn't say never, but he said, I did not, yes.
Okay,
Yep.
And number three, when Cassidy Hutchinson fired that lawyer and then brought on these lawyers that Liz Cheney recommended who worked for free, it was at that moment that, again, I'm reading from the article here in justthenews.com, it's characterized as her testimony was altered. It changed. Suddenly her story changed. Is that a good way to put it?
Yeah, she actually files an errata sheet, and instead of just making like punctuation corrections or minor corrections, she changed his actual factual meanings in her earlier testimony. That's something that we divulged a few months ago that shocked people. And of course, the big change is something she's never told the committee, then suddenly tells, which is the story in the presidential limousine. But the errata sheet is really remarkable. I think it was about 23 pages or 23 different instances of changing prior testimony. She called them corrections or errata, but that was a big moment, and I think that was another sign of the things that Barry Loudermilk has found.
Kind of a scandal, I would say.
My mouth is open again. I'm
this
just
is
shocked.
Huge. And again, listen, since the media and Kamala Harris and the campaign want to talk about January 6th, okay, let's talk about January 6th, but let's talk about all of it. John Solomon, justthenews.com. Always great work from you. Thank you so much.
Great to be with you guys. Love your show. Thanks.
Thank you. By the way, he's so right about Congressman Loudermilk. I was on Capitol Hill, I think it was right before the State of the Union, and I was interviewing a bunch of congressmen down there. They did a media row, and he came. I did a nice interview with him, and when the mics were turned off, I said, so are you going to speed up this process? Because we would love to get more on the January 6th hearing, all this stuff. And he said, I'm going to do this the right way.
Good for him.
I'm going to do this the right way. I'm not going to do it the way the Democrats did it. I'm going to do it the right way.
I'd forgotten about the accusation against him.
Yeah.
That is, it's interesting that he's really tearing it up.
He's doing it the right way.
Yes,
and I know it's not as fast as we'd all like it because we're used to how Nancy Pelosi and Liz Cheney does these things, but they do it in a corrupt way.
Yes.
And as much as we'd love to have our own Nancy Pelosi and Liz Cheney, well, I'm glad we've got Representative Loudermilk doing it the right way.
Now on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
Good Tuesday morning. Thanks for joining us. It is 7:37 on O'Connor and Company. Coming up, we're going to talk to Matt Schlapp with CPAC. What is wrong with me?
ACU.
ACU. And Julie Kelly.
Well, he wears many hats, that
I
Schlapp.
know.
The Schlapp hats are abundant and endless.
So yesterday, Kamala Harris went on Charlamagne the God.
Mm-hmm.
This is a radio show. I've never listened to it. Have you
It's
ever
a
listened to
syndicated
it?
radio show. It's played on mostly music stations and urban centers. It appeals to an African-American audience predominantly, pop culture, news, politics. We're going to start rebranding this show as O'Connor the God.
So,
just FYI.
You'd like that.
No,
And
it's
just
actually
all your
it's
co-hosts call
a
you that.
little sacrilegious, actually.
So let's listen to cut 11, what she had to say.
You know what's in the Constitution of the United States? The Fourth Amendment, which protects you against unreasonable searches and seizures. The Fifth Amendment, the Sixth Amendment, the 14th Amendment. And he's going to terminate the Constitution of the United States, which in most of those amendments, one thing or another was about a movement spurred by black people to ensure that we would be equally protected under the law. Come on.
Is it me, or does her voice sound different when she's talking to a black radio
She's doing
host?
an accent.
She's doing it
Sybil's
again,
coming
isn't
out.
she? Yeah.
Yep.
The Fourth Amendment was brought on by African Americans, who, by the way, at the time of the crafting of the Fourth Amendment, didn't actually have any sort of voice in our
Right.
government
They
at
did not
all.
have
But
a
that's
voice
an
in our-
interesting
yes,
rewriting of
yes.
history by the
We're
constitutional
going to see
expert
a lot of that.
Kamala Harris.
She's
But she's
elected.
raising the specter that if Donald Trump is
right.
elected, black people will be arrested and
That's
thrown
right.
in jails.
That's right.
That's what that's all about.
Yes.
She also, a caller called in and suggested that Trump, if he's elected, will put black people in camps. And by the way, there's only one party who has a history of putting American citizens based on their racial heritage and ethnicity into camps, and that would be the Democrats with Franklin Roosevelt.
That's right.
And she allowed that. And he, Charlamagne the God, allowed that. But honestly, if somebody called into this show and suggested such a thing, I would feel obligated to say, well, can we just be real here? Let's talk this through.
Yeah.
She allowed that message and actually affirmed that idea that Donald Trump is going to sic the military on people based on their skin color. This was the worst race-baiting, fear-mongering I've seen since Joe Biden.
And we have seen this from the left. We've seen that they're going to return. There's going to be concentration camps, mass deportation. I mean, we have seen this type of rhetoric.
Well, mass deportations is fine.
But they suggest it's
tearing
going to be like
children
tearing
from their
children from their
parents,
parents, first separating them, then deporting them separately, and it's just madness, right? So they create this image. I mean, they want there to be racial fear in this country. They are setting it up so that if he wins, there's racial unrest.
Which, again, is nothing new, but usually it's sort of on the down low, and it's used, they use buzzwords and dog whistles, but now they're so desperate that they're just blatant.
And again, if you use this, they're going to put you back in change language. What what lengths will you go to make sure this doesn't happen?
Good question. So that's the fear-mongering part of what Kamala Harris did on the Breakfast Club yesterday. Now, what about the pandering? We already know that she instituted a plan the day before she went on this show. We're told designed to appeal to black men in particular, which basically amounted to legalizing pot in all 50 states, giving black men and black entrepreneurs a first look at selling weed legally, and 1 million different forgivable loans, but only if you're black.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
so
the
racist.
The racist pandering, but then it didn't stop there. She was asked about reparations.
Here we go.
My question to you is, what's your stance on reparations? We all know that America became great, off the backs of free black labor. How progressive are you on making it a priority and righting America's wrongs? It's understood that you are running for president for all people of America. Asking for specifics for black communities doesn't mean don't do for others, but black Americans are heavily asked to vote Democrat in every election for over half a century with very little in return. What are your plans to address these very important issues and change that narrative?
By the way, anytime anyone accuses me of making a long-winded question and speechifying while I present a question, I'm going to just play them that all over again.
But let me just comment on that. He is in a painfully long way getting to a point that many people have said. He is essentially saying to her, you all take advantage of our vote. We are expected to vote a certain way, and we get nothing.
Yeah, well,
we get nothing.
He's right about that, but the solution is, finally get rid of the crime that's going on in our neighborhoods. But by the way, how about sending city council and city services to clean up our streets and turn these ghettos into, the nice white suburban neighborhoods that you've got? How about our schools? How about you stop accepting the failure rates at our schools and just assume that it's fine? There's a whole lot of other things you can do to stop taking advantage of black voters if you're a Democrat, well before you open up the wounds of slavery and start talking about reparations.
Yeah, how about stop lying about the police,
yeah.
right? And what they do for black communities, which is make them safer.
Let's hear Kamala's answer to that. Where do you stand? And by the way, any kind of reparations program that has ever floated, we're talking trillions.
Multi-trillions.
Trillions of dollars.
Thank you, Zeke.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And thank you for your work. So to your point, yes, I am running to be a president for all Americans. That being said, I do have clear eyes about the disparities that exist and the context in which they exist, meaning history, to your point. So my agenda, well, first of all, on the point of reparations, it has to be studied. There's no question about that. And I've been very clear about that position.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of my immediate plan, I will tell you a few of the following. One, as it relates to the economy, which is a lot of what you have addressed.
Yeah, okay. And then she goes into her economic plans, but it has to be studied.
Within the context, which is she was like veering in towards out there.
Yeah. But basically, she says, yeah, absolutely. We'll study
100%.
it. We'll move right there toward reparations, something that Barack Obama wouldn't do when he was the first black president. Also, you'll like this. Oh, hey, how about we keep this up? Thanks.
I grew up in the black church. I grew up attending 23rd Avenue Church of God in Oakland, California.
Hold on a minute. Didn't she move when she was in elementary school to Montreal with her Indian mother?
She just lies so easily.
She grew up in a black church like Joe Biden grew up in a black church, and we all know he grew up in a synagogue. It's 7:44.
The latest headlines.
And your place to talk about it.
News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
Making sense of the news.
I grew up in the black church. I grew up attending 23rd Avenue Church of God in
I love that. I grew up in a black church. I'd love to follow up on that. Please tell you. So how would you describe your Christian faith? Tell me about it. How important is it and how much? Please. She's
can you think, seriously, the number of questions Brett Baer right now is trying to, it's got to be tough.
It is revealing that a journalist like Brett Baer does not get the hour-long freewheeling, take questions from callers kind of thing that Charlamagne, the God, and the Breakfast Club got. There was one other moment here, and then we're going to move on to Tim Walz yesterday.
And so I say that as a preface to say two other things, and then I'll keep going. One, to deal with, I mean, you like that? You caught that.
Okay, filibuster, ma'am.
To deal with.
I love it that he actually called her out and says, what, you're going to keep going?
Oh, great.
After this incoherent, rambling word salad.
And so I say that as a preface to say two other things, and then I'll keep going. One, to deal with. I mean,
you're really going to keep going? They ended up, by the way, it's a syndicated show. They have hard breaks, the hard breaks that we have sometimes in radio that you're not allowed to go past. She was still talking when the show ended. She was still rambling. All right. Which brings us to her running mate, Tim Walz.
What would you do with a brain if you had one?
Do? Why, if I had a brain, I could while away the hours.
Yeah, honestly, that's a little too charming for him. But in a way, if you think about it, I mean, he's just a Midwestern farm boy who wears a flannel shirt like Ray Bolger did, and I don't know anything about anything.
I don't know words.
He's trying to attack J.D. Vance as a venture capitalist, and boy, talk about a boomerang hitting him in the face, stepping on a rake here while he's doing it. Here's Tim Walz just riffing on how bad J.D. Vance is.
And Senator Vance, he became a media darling. He wrote a book about the place he grew up, but the premise was trashing that place where he grew up rather than lifting it up. This guy's a venture capitalist cosplaying like he's a cowboy or something. I don't even know what a venture capitalist does most of the time.
All right, so a couple things here. First of all, it's such a despicable lie to suggest that Hillbilly Elegy trashes those. It is a Valentine, a love letter to the people who live in Appalachia.
His mother,
And it points out the horrific conditions that they're living in because of the neglect from our government and elitists like Tim Walz.
Well, and also, let's not forget, Tim Walz puts up on Twitter recently his picture sitting with Alexander Soros and other, gajillionaires.
On a sky-rise Tony Stark mansion in the sky in Manhattan.
He don't know any rich people.
Yeah, but what is this again?
I don't even know what a venture capitalist does most of the time.
So he wants to be...
Is that a brag?
Right. He's literally said, I'm stupid.
I don't know how the American economy works. I don't know how jobs are created.
I want to be in charge of the American economy. And by the way...
I don't even know what a venture capitalist does.
That should disqualify you.
No, there's
100%.
a lot of things that should disqualify, but it tells you it's defining. It's defining, and that's important. That's exactly who he is. And by the way, he knows exactly what a venture capitalist does.
He knows.
He says this because he's trying to cosplay.
Don't forget,
as
this is
some
the guy who
sort of
bragged
pumpkin.
that he was a teacher and none of his students could get into Yale. And he bragged about it.
It's 7:53.